Hi, in this video I'm gonna talk about the differences between a parameter and a statistic. But first, what do you think the difference is between the two concepts? So let's get started. Hello again. So parameters are characteristics that describes a population, and statistics are characteristics that describes a sample. Remembering parameters versus statistics is easy. Both are summary values that describes a group, and if you want to remember which group each summary value describes, just focus on their first letters. So here parameter and population, the both concepts or the both words start with the letter P. And statistics and sample, the both words here begin with the first letter, which is S. Now we need to know the difference between the population and the sample. What is the difference between the population and the sample? In research, the population refers to the complete set and the entire group of elements that the researcher aims to study and draw conclusions about. However, the sample refers to a subset or portion of the population that is selected for study purposes. Let's give you an illustrative example. Imagine a researcher wants to know the average income of the workers that live in the town X. So here our target population is the entire group of workers that live in this town. If you measured every worker's income, you would have data for the entire population. However, if you select a subset of the population and you randomly select some workers from the town and measure their income, in this case, this selected group of workers is your sample. So this is the difference between population and sample. Here, if we select some workers from the population, we obtain here our sample. If we draw our population and sample as follows, and we want to know the size of each group, in this case N with a capital letter represents the size of the population and it is called a parameter, and the lowercase letter N represents the size of the sample and it is called a statistic. So here a statistic that represents the average income of our sample is denoted by X bar. So here the mean of the income, the average income of our sample is denoted by X bar. However, if we want to know the average income of the entire group of workers in the town X, so here we should calculate the mean of the population, and this mean represents a summary value which is a parameter, and it is represented by the Greek symbol mu. This is the difference between the parameters that represent the population and the statistics that represent a sample. Why do researchers choose a sample rather than a population? Unfortunately, measuring an entire population to calculate each parameter exactly is usually impossible because they are too large. So we are stuck using samples and their statistics. Since studying the entire population can be impractical, time-consuming and costly, researchers use samples to gather data and conduct analysis that provide insights into the characteristics and behaviors of the larger group. Let's move now to the parameter versus statistic sample. So here, while parameters and statistics have the same type of summary values, statisticians denote them differently. Typically, we use Greek and uppercase Latin letters to signify parameters and lowercase Latin letters to represent statistics. Let's begin with the first summary value, which is the mean. Here, the mean of entire population here is represented by the Greek letter mu, which represents here the parameter. However, the mean of the sample is represented by x bar. If we want to study the standard deviation of our population, is here the symbol of the standard deviation of the population is sigma. However, the standard deviation of our sample, which represents here statistic, is s with lowercase letter. So the variance of the population is sigma squared, and the variance of sample here, which represents here statistic, is s squared. If we want to study the correlation of the entire population here, the symbol of our parameter here is the rho. However, if we want to study the correlation of our sample here, the symbol is r with lowercase letter. The proportion here is presented by p with capital letter for the population, and with p with lowercase p hat. So here p, and we put hat above the lowercase letter p for the sample. And finally, as we have already mentioned, the size of population is denoted by n with capital letter and n with small letter or lowercase letter for the samples. This is for now. Thank you for watching this video, and keep exploring and keep learning.